My true story from Missouri. After my husband's funeral, my daughter dropped me at a motel and said, "Stay here for a while." I stayed quiet for a week, then called a lawyer. She did not even park, just stopped in front of the old motor lodge and flung the car door open. "Take it," my daughter said, throwing the key card at me like a cigarette butt. "Do not look at me like that. You should be thankful. You are always a burden. Can't you see we need peace?" I blinked as the key hit my lap. My funeral dress was wrinkled from the long drive. She twisted her mouth in disgust. "Enjoy a few days without money," she added. "Once we pay off your phone and Wi-Fi, maybe you will learn how to respect $1. The car sped off. I stood in the hallway, carpet damp with old rain, eyes stinging from nothing. No scream, no plea, just silence, and the door closing behind me. The room smelled like bleach and desperation. Dim yellow light buzzed from the sconce above the sink. The carpet was a tired brown, worn in the corners like an old prayer mat. The curtains hung stiff, stained with the kind of mildew that no longer tries to hide. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my funeral dress. My black shoes left faint marks on the cheap floral bedspread. Outside, the sign flickered. Sunview Motor Lodge, weekly rates available. A place meant for those passing through, not for mothers cast aside. Mark had died 6 days earlier. One moment, he was laughing at the preacher's crooked tie in the church pew. The next, he was pale in a pine box. We had been married 54 years. We buried him on a Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, I was homeless. My daughter's words still rang in my ears, sharp as frost. "Take the key. Be thankful. Learn how to live without someone paying your bills." And so I did. I did not call. I did not beg. I didn't even touch the small cell phone she had left unplugged in my purse. I just stayed. There was nothing noble about it. I did not pray. I did not cry. I listened to the broken hum of the air conditioner and watched the shadows change on the cracked ceiling. Sometimes I would look at myself in the bathroom mirror, its edge chipped from a long-ago fight or fall. I would stare at the woman in the glass and wonder, is this still me? The gray hair, the lined skin, the silence. I had not spoken out loud since the motel door closed behind me. I ate from a vending machine and drank lukewarm tap water from a plastic cup. Once I tried to call the front desk to ask for a towel, but I hung up after dialing 0. The silence was safer. Talking would have made it real. On the 4th night, I laid flat on the bed and opened the small jewelry pouch I had carried from the funeral. Inside was my wedding ring. Mark had told me never to take it off, even after he was gone. "You're still my girl," he'd whisper, "even when I'm not around." He used to call me Myrrh, short for Meredith. "You're the steady one," he'd say when the kids got loud or life got lean. "You make the plans, you hold the line." Now, there were no plans, just room 112 and silence thick as mud. On the 6th night, I found myself opening an old envelope Mark had left in our safe deposit box, a copy I had stuffed in my coat pocket at the last minute before the funeral. I unfolded it carefully. My hands shook. It was a statement. Just numbers. Bank speak. But something caught my eye. There was a joint account I had forgotten. Mark's old retirement rollover. He had moved the fund 6 months before he died. The balance was updated just last month. $253,489.71. My breath caught. I looked again. The account had both our names. And beside the last note, Mark had scribbled in blue ink, barely legible, "If they forget to care for you, let this take your side." The tears did not come easy. They arrived like a slow leak in a dam, quiet, steady, and irreparable. I laid back down and held the paper to my chest. My husband was gone, but he had remembered, and now so would I. On the seventh morning, I returned the key to the front desk and asked for my phone. The woman behind the counter didn't look up. She slid the plastic bag across the counter like it contained trash. I carried it back to the room with both hands as if it were something sacred. The battery was dead, of course. I found an outlet behind the dusty mini fridge and waited. The blue glow of the screen flickered back to life like a breath returning after a long sleep. There were 36 missed calls, none from my daughter. Most were automatic voicemails, pharmacy refills, appointment reminders. But there, buried in the spam, was a subject line that stopped my heart. Account update, joint owner confirmation. It was from Mark's bank. I clicked. The email was dated 3 weeks ago, 2 days before the heart attack that took him. It confirmed a joint update on a retirement account. It said, "Dear Meredith Collins, this message confirms your active role as joint account holder of the following: Fidelity Premier Secure Account 7680. Current balance $253,489.71. The numbers blurred. My hands trembled. I clicked the link to log in. Use the old password Mark made up for us back in 2007. Collins always 2. It worked. There it was, clear as sky after a storm. $253,489.71. Tears came like a tide. I could not stop. They poured down, warm and quiet, washing the dust from my cheeks. I rocked back and forth on the edge of the bed, holding the phone like it was Mark's hand. I whispered into the still room, "You knew they'd leave me." And he had. Of course he had. I remembered now how just days before the funeral, Mark had pressed a printed email into my palm. "Keep this," he said, with that soft way of speaking that always made me listen. "What is it?" I'd asked. "For your future," he said, "in case you need to walk away someday with your head held high." I thought it was just insurance. I thought it was him being poetic. I had no idea he had moved his money. No idea he had already prepared the world for me to stand alone. Not just survive, stand. He knew our daughter. He had watched in silence how her love had turned sour with time, how her tone shifted when she married, how her eyes rolled when I offered help. He had never fought her. He had simply prepared me. Now, in the cracked mirror of a budget motel, I felt the warmth of his gift settle deep into my bones. It was not just money. It was dignity. It was proof that someone once believed I mattered. I wiped my eyes and sat straighter. They had tried to exile me in silence. Mark had handed me a trumpet, and I was about to play it loud. I did not pack right away. Instead, I opened the desk drawer, pulled out the motel notepad, and began to write. I listed everything Mark had once told me to prepare for quietly without asking permission. First, I called the hospital, paid the outstanding bills from Mark's final stay. The woman on the line stammered when I said I would pay in full. I did not offer an explanation. Second, I searched for a lawyer. Not a loud one, a steady one. Someone who knew the law in Missouri better than my daughter knew manipulation. I found him in the yellowed corners of the motel binder. An estate and small business attorney named Henry Keller. He had a faded ad that said, "We help you keep what's yours." I liked that. I left a message. "This is Meredith Collins. I'd like to schedule a quiet consultation. I have a plan in mind." Third, I walked down the street to the neighboring motel. Not mine, hers. The motel my daughter and her husband had bought 2 years ago, paid with a loan co-signed by Mark. I asked the manager for a brochure. He gave it to me, grinning like I was a confused old woman. He had no idea I knew the property lines. No idea, I remembered Mark whispering one night. She begged us for help, said she'd pay us back in love. I signed because I loved you, not her. I carried the brochure back to my room. Then I called the county office, asked about licensing, zoning, building codes. By nightfall, I knew everything. The gaps in her permits, the pending liens, the inspections she had failed. I knew her walls were thin, her paperwork thinner. I sat on the bed, holding the notepad full of notes, and whispered to Mark, "You always said I was the quiet kind, but not invisible, never invisible." The wind howled outside. A loose shutter slapped against the window frame. I thought of Mark's voice again. Not his last words, but the ones he used when I was tired, young, and full of doubt. "One day, I will not be here to fight for you, so I built you a sword." Now, I knew what that sword was. So I built you the money, the deed, the law. I was not planning revenge. I was planning protection. I did not want to hurt my daughter. I just wanted her to know she could no longer hurt me. I laid the notepad on the nightstand. Tomorrow I would call Henry again. Tomorrow I would ask him to draft something she would never forget. Not a threat, a reminder, a signature that said, "I remember everything, and I am done being quiet." I dialed the number Henry Keller had given me the day before. His voicemail picked up on the third ring. I left my name, my situation, and requested an appointment before the week ended. I hung up without emotion. 24 hours later, I sat in his tidy office, sunlight filtering through Venetian blinds. He offered me coffee. I declined. He listened, leaned forward, and nodded with understanding. I handed him a printed email from the bank, confirming full control over the joint account, and a copy of Mark's handwritten will, dated just 6 months before his passing. The penmanship was shaky, but the words precise. Meredith Collins, sole owner of all assets upon my death. Henry adjusted his glasses. Your husband did not just set you up. He protected you. I gave a soft nod and explained my worries. My daughter knows how to log into that account. I want to block all digital access immediately. Henry tapped away on his laptop. Within minutes, he confirmed a freeze on external access. Only you and I will have withdrawal privileges, he said. They'll need a court order to trace activity. Next, I brought up the motel. The property next door, built and managed by my daughter and son-in-law, was sitting empty. She maintains permits, I said. But I want to discuss securing my interest in that motel. She had used Mark's loan to build it. He never saw repayment. It sat in limbo. No trust set up. Henry reviewed the paperwork I'd brought and added it to his pile. You're officially recognized as co-owner. Your daughter's name is on the loan documents because Mark co-signed, but the property sits in his estate and therefore now in yours. I felt a cold calm rush through me. He continued, I can draft a petition for a court order to partition the property. We can ask the court to force the sale or allow you to manage it. We can also file an issue preventing any refinancing or sale without your signature. I swallowed, holding his gaze. I don't want to ruin her life. I just want to make sure I am not erased again. He offered a supportive smile. We'll make this about fairness, not punishment, but legally sound. We agreed. He would file the necessary documentation immediately, request asset freezes, and prepare a petition for property partition. That afternoon, I sat back in the motel room. I opened my notebook and listed what had already changed. No one else can touch my money. I can decide the fate of the motel. I can walk away or step in. The power felt unfamiliar, but not frightening. I thought of Mark again, his voice warm and steady. This gift isn't just money, it's trust, mine for you to carry on. I closed my eyes, sensing a weight lifting. It was time to live, not just exist. I picked up my phone and I stared at my daughter's contact name. I felt no need to call her. I waited. The legal process would speak for me. No shouting, no tears, only proof. I drove to the small branch of Midwest Heritage Bank early in the morning, the sky still a pale blue with the last hints of dawn. Inside, I took a deep breath, smoothing my widow's blazer before stepping up to the teller's window. I laid out the paperwork from Henry, the asset freeze notice, the court-approved ownership documentation, and a stack of checks from my joint account. The teller, a young woman with nervous eyes, scanned the documents, called over a manager, and asked, "You're purchasing the motel?" I nodded. Yes, I want to take full ownership. The manager reviewed everything, stamped forms, and finally returned them. "Congratulations, Mrs. Collins. Your account is clear and property documents will be updated by this afternoon." Relief washed over me. Will be updated. From the bank, I drove a few blocks to the adjoining motel property. Sunlight hit faded red letters above the door. Sunrise Suites. The building leaned slightly, peeling paint. The parking lot cracked with weeds. I pulled into a vacant spot and stepped out, feeling the late morning air sting my lungs. I hadn't arranged an appointment. I just dropped by. A burly man in a faded polo shirt came out from the old office building beside it. "You Meredith Collins?" he asked, cautious. I nodded. "Yes, I'd like to talk about buying this property." He pointed inside. "Sit down." Inside, a dusty office smelled of old carpet and stale coffee. He introduced himself as Frank, the on-site manager hired by my daughter's company. We talked quietly. Frank had been making payroll, paying utilities, but without a real owner, he wasn't sure what would happen. I offered him a contract to stay on if he wished, and fair compensation down the line. "I'm here to buy the property outright," I said, handing over paperwork Henry had prepared. Frank raised an eyebrow. "They didn't tell me they were selling." I paused. "They didn't know I could." He looked at the documents, nodded slowly. "You're legit. Okay then." He stood, shook my hand. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Collins." That afternoon, after signing the transfer paperwork at the courthouse, I bought paint, new light fixtures, and fresh curtains. I found a local sign painter who stayed up late customizing my logo, Meredith's Rest. It was simple, dignified, in pale blue and gold, colors I always admired in my late husband's favorite pocket watch. At night, I walked the property with Henry at my side. The main office was cleaned and painted. A small break room, once used by corporate guests, now bore a floral rug and a chalkboard reading, "Welcome to Meredith's Rest." The long hallway of rooms was quietly rekeyed, new linens folded on each bed. The lobby smelled of fresh lavender. Henry asked, "Are you going to run this?" I paused, running my hand over the polished wood desk. "I am. I will." He smiled, impressed. "Your husband would be proud." I closed my eyes, remembering Mark's words before his last hospital stay. "One day, I'll leave you something they cannot take, something no one can throw you out of." That was my moment. I opened my notebook and scribbled the final line of our love letters. "You always said the world would respect ownership more than feelings. You were right." Then I smiled. By the next morning, I was organizing a small opening. No fanfare, just fresh-baked cookies at the desk and a few local guests who appreciated the quiet charm. I greeted each visitor, asked after their journey. I found the old lobby sofa sturdy enough to sit beside clients listening. It felt like new. A faint memory drifted through my mind of Mark teaching me numbers on that sofa years ago. This time I was counting beds, keys, invoices. This time it was mine. That afternoon, I walked across the parking lot to meet Frank. He handed me a list of maintenance concerns. "Water heater's old," he said, "but we can handle minor repairs. I have a plumber on call." I nodded and took the list. Thank you, Frank. He paused, his face softer. Mrs. Collins, thank you for giving me a real job again. We shook hands and I realized what I had really done. I had taken back more than property. I had taken back purpose and maybe given someone else a second chance too. Back in the office, I placed a framed photo of Mark and me behind the desk. In front, I set a small plaque. Establishment 2025, Meredith's Rest. It was modest, but it carried weight. It meant I was accountable. It meant I mattered. That evening, I stood alone in the lobby, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. The motel had been quietly reborn. A year ago, I never would have thought I'd be here, but now I was exactly where I needed to be. I unlocked the office door, flipped off the sign painter's protective sheet, revealing the name to the world. Light spilled out. I smiled and touched the wood of the desk. Mark's last gift had kept its promise. My daughter arrived at Meredith's Rest on a humid Missouri afternoon, storm clouds gathering overhead. She swiped the office door open with a scowl. Clouds gathered behind her. Her teenage son, my grandson, shuffled in meekly. He looked uneasy, sensing the tension before I even spoke. "Mom," my daughter began, voice shaky as she closed the door. "They're calling us at home. We need access to your account. We need money to pay debts, to fix the house, to—" She broke off, eyes searching my face. I sat behind the check-in desk, a ledger open, pen resting gently between my fingers. I gave her a slow, deliberate nod. "I hear you," I said softly, "and I understand." I paused. "But that account, this motel, is not up for grabs." Her face reddened. "You can't just cut us off. That money was supposed to pay our mortgage, our car loan. Who does that for their own daughter?" I lifted my pen, tapping the wood. "Mark left that money for me, for my future, not to bail out mistakes. He trusted that I would use it for protection, not to rescue your problems again." She clenched her fists. "So, it's okay that we lose everything. You'd rather line the pockets of strangers than help your own family." Though I felt my heart tighten, I remained measured. "This isn't about strangers. It's about purpose. I built something here, something real, and I won't let guilt drive me into ruin. Your family needs to stand on its own." Her shoulders shook. Anger or fear, I could not tell. My grandson tugged at her sleeve, eyes downcast. I looked at him. He stepped forward, touching my hand gently. "Grandma," he said, voice small, "we love you." Tears welled in my eyes, not of weakness, but of pride. I placed my hand over his. "And I love you," I whispered. "That is never in dispute." My daughter's anger froze at that moment. The tenderness between grandmother and child spoke louder than her arguments. She looked at me. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because," I said firmly, "Mark and I spoke about legacy, not rescue. About standing tall, not leaning on guilt. I will help you, yes, but not with the entirety of what he gave me. I'll assist with small things, legal fees, counseling, help, but not absolve debt." She stared at me. "You're breaking my heart." I leaned forward. "Good. Maybe that's the first time you'll feel the weight of your own choices." My grandson squeezed my fingers. I breathed in his trust. I looked back at my daughter. "You will not lose me, but you will not control me." She stepped back, anger giving way to resignation. She turned away, voice soft. "Is that it?" I stood and held my hand out, draped in a silver band that once belonged to her father. "That is enough." Her eyes flickered. She took my hand and released it just as quietly. She placed a hand on her son's shoulder. He met my gaze, his eyes full of love. My daughter's voice trembled. If that's how it has to be. I nodded. I understood. This was not a reconciliation, but a boundary drawn in honor. As she and my grandson left the office, the air crackled with an uneasy peace. I closed the door behind them, and I allowed myself a moment of stillness. Mom, my grandson looked back from the parking lot. Can I stay and help? I opened the door again. He trotted in. Yes, sweetheart, you may. You're welcome here. He lit up, eyes bright, as he helped me update the reservation ledger for a walk-in guest. His presence warmed me more than any family turmoil could. Outside the window, dark clouds broke. A single ray of sun stretched across the sign above, Meredith's Rest. I smiled, knowing in my heart that standing firm was not being cruel, it was being true. I looked down at my grandson's small hand beside mine, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt the solidity of my path. Sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds as I arranged the last paper napkins on the breakfast buffet table at Meredith's Rest. Pancakes, eggs, fresh fruit, coffee. The spread was simple, warm, familiar. Outside on the front porch, folding chairs had been set for local neighbors, a ribbon strung across the front door, and a small group of volunteers stood ready to welcome whoever might walk in. My grandson helped me position a stack of flyers near the free coffee urn. His face was bright with pride. I wore a calm smile as the townspeople gathered. Retirees from the church, a couple of truck drivers who passed by every morning, and local reporters who had caught wind of my story. A woman in her 70s whispered, "I'm so glad this place is yours." I nodded and dipped my head. A volunteer tapped on the microphone. "Welcome everyone to the grand opening of Meredith's Rest." Their voice echoed softly in the lobby. Today is not just about a motel. It is about renewal, resilience, and community. The applause was gentle, but genuine. I stepped forward, smoothing my cardigan, feeling a steady sense of purpose. "Thank you all for coming," I began, voice clear and measured. "When my husband, Mark, and I met this place years ago, he said, 'One day we'll make it ours.' Today, I stand here with that promise fulfilled. This is our gift to travelers, to families, to anyone needing a safe, kind place to rest," the crowd murmured. I glanced at my grandson, his hair still messy, eyes gleaming with admiration. I continued. "I named it Meredith's Rest, not only because that is my name, but because rest means recovery. My husband passed recently, and I found in grief that rest is more than sleep. It is renewal. I offer that to anyone who arrives here." I paused as volunteers began offering trays of warm biscuits, coffee, and juice. Reporters snapped pictures, penning notes. A banner unfurled behind me. "Welcome, Meredith's Rest. Open now." After the applause, I shared about the small scholarship fund I had set up with community donations and a portion of profits from every room booked. "We will help widows in this county who lack support," I announced. "We will cover rental, utility bills, even help with groceries if needed, because when someone loses their partner, they do not need a loan. They need a lifeline." A round of soft cheers rose. My grandson looked at me, eyes wide. Later, he would tell me, "I want to help with that too, Grandma." I tucked a stray hair behind his ear and whispered, "Together, my love." By midday, the motel lobby was warm with conversation and smells of breakfast. One of the truck drivers, a gruff but friendly man named Carl, came forward. "Meredith," he rumbled, "thank you for this. This place is real rest, like a home." A school teacher whose mother had recently passed away asked for a few bed and breakfast vouchers to ease the burden on students whose parents were ill or grieving. I handed them over with a smile. In a corner, a local reporter approached. Mrs. Thompson at the Tribune would like to write a story. I nodded. Please tell them this. A widow reclaimed her life and built one of kindness in its place, but I did not do it alone. I gestured to a volunteer, then to my grandson, and finally to the small but growing crowd. When questions were asked, I stayed humble, reminding everyone I was just one woman trying to pay forward the kindness Mark and I had received in our lifetime. I paused as the ribbon was cut. My grandson said, "Ready?" I took his small hand, and together we pulled the ribbon. I heard applause again, this time richer, warmer. A volunteer handed me a hot cup of coffee. I closed my eyes and breathed in the moment, the scent of fresh grounds and the soft rustle of neighbors greeting neighbors. After the ceremony, I moved to the side table where the scholarship donation box stood. A line had formed. Elderly ladies pinched dollar bills in envelopes. A mother slipped in a check. My grandson dropped in a few coins he had saved. I watched them, gratitude swelling inside me. Later, I walked the motel's hallway, stopping at rooms freshly prepared. I knocked gently at room 3. A woman stepped out, her cheeks red, her voice shaky. "I just lost my husband," she whispered. "Your place gave me somewhere my daughter didn't. Thank you." I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Daughter didn't. You are welcome here always." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. By afternoon, the local news crew was interviewing me at the front porch. "Mrs. Thompson asked why you chose to open your home to strangers," the reporter asked on camera. I paused, looking down the empty parking lot, the motel sign shining in the soft sunlight. "I lost my partner," I said softly. "I know how deep loneliness can feel. I want every traveler, every widow, every weary soul to find a soft place to sleep, a warm meal, and a hand extended in kindness. That's why I named this place Meredith's Rest." They cut. A neighbor from down the street patted my hand. "You did good, Mayor." That evening, after guests had checked in and dinner was cooling in the kitchen, my grandson came to stand beside me. "Gran, you're a real hero." I leaned and kissed his cheek. "No, darling. I'm just a woman who remembered what love built and decided not to let grief break it." The crowd had come. The motel was filling. The scholarship fund had started with over $5,000 from donations that day. My daughter had not returned, but I did not feel empty. I felt rooted. Later, as I closed the office door, I stood for a moment in the quiet hallway. The smell of clean sheets and lavender lingered. I placed my hand on the wall, whispering to Mark in my heart, "Thank you. I am doing more than you ever asked, and I am not afraid." The newly opened Meredith's Rest stood as evidence not of loss, but of love's resilience. I turned off the lights, ready for the work ahead, because rest wasn't just built, it was shared. A thin frost coated the grass outside Meredith's Rest as morning light brushed the motel's faded sign. Inside, the lobby hummed softly, lamps were on, gentle carols played, and festive decorations draped the breakfast nook. Today was the first holiday gift event for guests and the community. The bells above the door jingled. My daughter and grandson stepped in, cheeks flushed with cold. My daughter looked hesitant, clutching her purse straps. My grandson ran forward, eyes shining. "Grandma," he called, wrapping his arms around my legs. I knelt to meet his embrace. He whispered in my ear, "I'm proud of you." I smiled and stood to face my daughter. She swallowed hard. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I was wrong. I treated you like burdensome baggage. I didn't see you. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. I felt old sorrow surface, but more powerful was calm clarity. "I forgive," I said gently, "but I will not return." The words were deliberate. Love remained, but boundaries stood firm. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand. My grandson stepped forward, offering to help serve coffee. My daughter joined him, carrying a tray of pastries. Though not living here, they were working here together. For the rest of the morning, laughter and warmth filled the lobby. Guests, some widows, some travelers, received stockings of essentials, warm blankets, holiday cards. The community gathered, sharing stories and smiles. I watched from behind the front desk. My daughter brought a woman to me, a widow whose husband had died just 2 months ago. She handled her trembling hands around a steaming mug. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means everything." I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and offered a hug. As she pulled away, she met my gaze. "You gave me hope." The local photographer snapped a moment, my daughter and grandson helping serve. Me greeting guests with a kind smile. A lens captured our unity, not perfect, but genuine. Later, our reporter snapped photos and wrote notes. At Meredith's Rest, she typed, "Age is not a handicap. Purpose is." The words echoed through my heart. By afternoon, the guests had gone in pairs to their rooms, some staying the night, others just for warmth and company. The sun dipped warm over Missouri's frosted fields. I watched through the window as my daughter and grandson walked outside, removing holiday lights and gathering empty mugs. She glanced back at me and smiled, a quiet acknowledgement of healing. He waved, small and confident, as he carried towels inside. That evening, I walked the hallway in silence, pausing at each door. I knocked gently on room 4. A woman answered, holding her daughter. The little girl's eyes lit up when she saw me. Holding her, she said, "I love your smile, Grandma." I hugged her, and the woman whispered, "Thank you for everything." Back in my office, I sat at my desk. My daughter joined me, sitting across. She didn't apologize again. She didn't ask me to move back. She simply looked me in the eye. "I want to help keep this place open. I want to give back." I nodded. That would mean everything. She leaned forward, and we held hands across the polished wood. My grandson appeared holding a handmade ornament for Meredith's Rest. He placed it gently between us. I looked at them, my family, imperfect and healing, together in this place of restoration. I breathed in the warm scent of cinnamon and hope. Later that evening, a national news outlet posted an article. "Widow in Missouri reclaims life, restores community, and shows us all that age is not a handicap. Purpose is." Comments flooded in from around the country. So inspiring. She shows us what strength looks like. Purpose over age. Yes. I sat on my porch swing, grandson asleep inside, daughter cooking dinner for volunteers. I felt Mark's presence, my husband of 50 years, smiling in the stillness. His promise had come true. The motel stood strong. The scholarship fund had started. Community had come home. I lifted my voice in a quiet prayer. For anyone who feels left behind, remember this. Sometimes silence is the strongest action. Rest can be revolution. And a single purpose can change everything. Soft snowflakes drifted down. I closed my eyes and let them land on my eyelashes. My heart was quiet but full, and in that gentle hush, I knew I had finally found my rest and my freedom. It was Christmas morning, and the frost lay thick on the motel's front steps. I had been up since dawn, setting out cinnamon rolls, folding napkins into little fans, and humming carols under my breath. Inside Meredith's Rest, warmth pulsed from every corner, the hum of the coffee machine, the soft jazz from a dusty speaker, the light clinking of mugs and spoons. Guests moved gently, thanking the volunteers who had come to serve breakfast to anyone spending the holidays alone. Then the door opened, and I saw her, my daughter. She stood on the threshold, her winter coat buttoned too high, fingers clutching her purse strap like a lifeline. Her son, my grandson, stepped in beside her. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and his eyes searched mine with cautious hope. I wiped my hands on my apron and approached slowly. "Merry Christmas," I said gently. My daughter opened her mouth, but no words came. Her eyes were wet. "I was wrong," she finally whispered. "I treated you like a burden when all you ever did was care. I didn't see you, Mom. I didn't see your strength, and I'm sorry." The words came raw, not rehearsed, not forced. I reached out and took her gloved hand. "I forgive," I said simply, "but I will not return." She nodded. No protest, just understanding. Her son slipped his hand into mine. "Grandma," he said, "can I help today?" I smiled through the sting in my throat. "Of course, sweetheart. I'd be honored." He ran to join the volunteers, pouring juice and passing out wrapped pastries. My daughter followed, placing her purse behind the counter, then taking a tray of warm biscuits with quiet focus. All morning, the three of us moved in rhythm. She poured coffee. I greeted guests. My grandson folded napkins with the pride of a young soldier on duty. It was not perfection, but it was peace. Later, when the crowd thinned, my daughter returned to the front desk. She did not cry. She did not beg. She sat across from me and said, "I'd like to help, not for money, not to undo anything, just to give back." I looked at her. The woman who once left me with a motel key and a hollow goodbye now sat with her palms open. "That would mean everything," I replied. She nodded and rose to join the cleanup crew. My grandson peeked into the office, holding up a handmade ornament that read, "For Meredith's rest." I took it in my hands, then placed it on the small tree behind the counter. His smile was pure light. That evening, after the last guest had left and the halls had quieted, I walked the motel's corridor alone. I paused outside each door, listening for the hush of sleep, the flicker of quiet comfort. At room 4, a woman stepped out in a robe, cradling a cup of cocoa. "I just lost my husband," she whispered, voice barely audible. "And this place, this morning, you gave me something I didn't think I'd feel again." "Hope." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone here," I said. "You are remembered." She smiled and returned to her room. Back in the office, I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and stepped out onto the front porch. My daughter and grandson were taking down the folding chairs together. She looked up and gave me a soft smile, one that asked for nothing, offered only truth. A local journalist had been among the guests that morning. Before leaving, she handed me a slip of paper, a headline draft. "Age is not a handicap. Purpose is." I let the words settle. Inside, the fireplace crackled. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, silent, forgiving. I thought of Mark, of the strength he left me, the dignity he ensured I would never have to beg for. I thought of silence, not as exile, but as choice, as resistance, as a sword. And now the silence had borne fruit. Later that night, I sat in my office with my grandson curled up beside me, reading an old guest book entry aloud. My daughter placed a cup of tea by my hand. She didn't ask for a second chance. She earned it with her presence. I leaned back, listening to the hush of the motel, the small sacred sound of people resting without fear. The sign above the door read, "Meredith's Rest." And finally, I believed it. Not just a place to sleep, a place to heal, to remember, to begin again. And in that stillness, I whispered a final truth for anyone who might be listening. If they try to leave you behind, build forward, not out of revenge, but out of remembrance. Sometimes the quietest revolution begins with one locked door, one remembered name, and one woman who refused to disappear. If you are feeling cast out or forgotten, remember sometimes silence speaks louder than words. It takes courage to walk away and even more to build your own home. Don't stay silent. Let your quiet strength build something lasting.